In the darkest depths of the Vietnam War between 1965 and 1972, a brave and daring group of American and Australian soldiers faced an enemy far more sinister than anything seen on the surface. The labyrinthine network of tunnels dug by the Viet Cong gave rise to a special breed of warrior, known as the tunnel rats. Their harrowing stories of bravery, courage, and sacrifice have etched their names into the annals of history. One soldier in particular, Sergeant Donald, exemplified the tunnel rats' unbreakable commitment to their deadly mission, earning him a posthumous Medal of Honor. Armed with little more than a flashlight, a pistol, and their unwavering determination, these fearless warriors crawled into the claustrophobic depths of the tunnels, facing explosive traps, venomous creatures, and enemy combatants at every turn. As President John F. Kennedy once said, "The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it." The tunnel rats were no exception, paying the ultimate price in their pursuit of victory. Join us as we explore the underground world of the tunnel rats, uncovering the stories of these unsung heroes who faced unimaginable horrors in the suffocating darkness beneath the jungles of Vietnam. Welcome to the Ancient Diary. Descending into darkness, the unsung heroes of underground warfare in Vietnam. In the early years of the war, US and Australian forces quickly discovered that the Viet Cong had constructed an extensive underground tunnel network throughout South Vietnam. These tunnels, painstakingly dug by hand using simple tools, served as living quarters, storage areas, and even makeshift hospitals for the Viet Cong. They allowed the enemy to move undetected, launch surprise attacks, and evade capture. Clearly, something had to be done to counter this stealthy and deadly tactic. These soldiers, mainly from the United States and Australia, received specialized training to navigate the dangerous and claustrophobic conditions of the tunnels. They came from diverse military backgrounds, but shared a common trait: unwavering bravery in the face of danger. One of the most famous tunnel rats was Sergeant Thomas "Tom" Ash Taylor, a decorated soldier who served in the 25th Infantry Division. He later recounted his tunnel experiences in the 1987 book Tunnel Rat in Vietnam. Tunnel rats received no special equipment, relying instead on their ingenuity, problem-solving skills, and a few basic tools. With only a flashlight, pistol, and knife, they crawled through narrow, dark passageways, never knowing what awaited them around each corner. The tunnels were often filled with traps such as tripwires, punji sticks, and venomous snakes, making every step a potential encounter with death. As they maneuvered through these underground mazes, tunnel rats also had to confront the constant threat of lurking enemy soldiers. One anecdote highlighting the tunnel rats' courage comes from First Sergeant Bill "Mool" Marshall, who served with the 1st Infantry Division in 1966. During one operation, Marshall discovered a hidden tunnel entrance and entered alone, only to come face to face with a Viet Cong soldier in the darkness. The two men struggled, forgetting their weapons. Marshall eventually overpowered his opponent and dragged him out of the tunnel for capture. In addition to the physical dangers they faced, tunnel rats bore immense psychological burdens. Darkness, confined spaces, and the constant fear of death could wear down even the strongest soldiers. But despite the challenges, tunnel rats pressed on, driven by a sense of duty and the knowledge that their work was vital to the war effort. Their efforts were not in vain. The intelligence gathered by tunnel rats helped map tunnel systems, identify Viet Cong supply routes, and uncover weapon and supply caches. They also played a key role in destroying tunnels by planting explosives and collapsing the intricate passageways to prevent future use by the enemy. The contributions of tunnel rats to the Vietnam War effort were immense, yet their stories often go untold. While battles raged above ground, these brave men fought a secret war beneath the soil of Vietnam. In the words of Tom Taylor, tunnel rats were a breed apart, and they knew it. They lived a life of danger, filth, and deprivation that would have driven others mad. It's essential that we remember and honor the sacrifices and heroism of these unsung heroes who faced darkness and terror in underground warfare. Underground fortresses, unraveling the secrets of Viet Cong tunnels. The intricate network of tunnels used by the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War has long fascinated historians and military enthusiasts alike. These underground fortresses, stretching for hundreds of miles beneath the jungles of Vietnam, stand as a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of Viet Cong forces. This hidden subterranean world played a critical role in the war, giving the Viet Cong a strategic advantage that confounded their enemies and allowed them to wage highly effective guerrilla warfare. The origins of the tunnel systems trace back to the late 1940s, when the communist forces known as the Viet Minh began digging tunnels as a way to evade French colonial forces. Over the years, the tunnels grew in complexity and scale, peaking during the 1960s. The most famous tunnel network was the Cu Chi tunnels, located on the outskirts of Saigon. Spanning more than 150 miles, these tunnels served as the Viet Cong's base of operations for the 1968 Tet Offensive. Tunnel construction was an arduous and dangerous process, carried out mainly by local villagers and Viet Cong soldiers. Armed with little more than basic hand tools, they dug deep into the earth, removing soil in small woven baskets. Tunnels were generally narrow, only about 2 feet wide and 3 feet high, to make navigation difficult for larger American soldiers. Multiple bends and turns were intentionally added to slow down intruders and facilitate trap placement. The tunnel systems were highly organized and efficient, comprising multiple levels and chambers for different purposes. They included living quarters, weapon and supply storage areas, and makeshift hospitals where the wounded could be treated. Ventilation shafts ensured a steady flow of fresh air, while hidden entrances and exits allowed Viet Cong fighters to launch surprise attacks or vanish without a trace. Some tunnels even featured rudimentary plumbing systems, enabling the Viet Cong to remain underground for extended periods. One of the most fascinating aspects of the tunnel systems was the ingenious traps devised by the Viet Cong to protect their underground sanctuaries. These traps were designed to maim, kill, or capture intruders, and ranged from simple bamboo stake pits known as punji traps to more elaborate devices like the swinging log trap, a heavy log rigged to swing down and crush an unsuspecting enemy soldier. Poisonous snakes were also known to lurk in tunnels, adding yet another layer of danger for those daring to enter. The strategic importance of the tunnels in the war cannot be overstated. They allowed the Viet Cong to launch surprise attacks against US and South Vietnamese forces and then disappear back into the safety of their underground hideouts. The tunnels also served as vital communication and coordination channels among widely dispersed Viet Cong units, enabling them to execute coordinated assaults on enemy positions. One of the most remarkable tunnel-related stories occurred in 1966 during the Battle of Tan Son Nhut, when a group of Viet Cong commandos infiltrated the heavily fortified Tan Son Nhut air base, using a tunnel that led directly into the base. Once inside, they launched a devastating attack against the US and South Vietnamese forces stationed there, causing significant damage before retreating back into the safety of their tunnels. Perfect. Mysteries of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Winding through the rugged terrain of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, the Ho Chi Minh Trail stands as a testament to the resourcefulness and determination of the North Vietnamese forces during the Vietnam War. This strategic supply route, named in honor of the North Vietnamese leader Ho Chi Minh, played a crucial role in the conflict, allowing the North to transport troops, weapons, and supplies to their Viet Cong comrades fighting in the South. The story of the Ho Chi Minh Trail is one of ingenuity, resilience, and the sheer will to defy the odds in the face of overwhelming adversity. The trail was not a single, clearly defined path. Rather, it was a vast, intricate network of roads, footpaths, and river routes that stretched for thousands of miles. It originated in North Vietnam and snaked its way through the densely forested mountains of Laos and Cambodia before finally reaching its destination in the south. Construction of the trail began in 1959 as tensions between North and South Vietnam escalated. By the mid-1960s, it had become a vital lifeline for the North Vietnamese Army, NVA, and the Viet Cong. To maintain the secrecy of the trail and to protect it from enemy attacks, the North Vietnamese employed a wide range of tactical innovations. The dense jungle canopy provided natural camouflage from American aircraft, while decoy trails were laid out to confuse and mislead enemy forces. They devised ingenious methods to cross rivers and navigate mountainous terrain, using bamboo rafts, makeshift bridges, and carefully hidden log pathways. In addition, a system of way stations was established along the trail, allowing troops to rest and resupply before continuing their long, treacherous journey southward. Transporting supplies and troops along the trail was no easy task. The rugged terrain and harsh tropical climate took a serious toll on both man and machine. Convoys of trucks, pack animals, and soldiers on foot pushed through torrential rains, oppressive heat, and the ever-present threat of malaria-carrying mosquitoes. Yet despite these formidable challenges, the North Vietnamese persevered, displaying an unwavering commitment to keeping the supply route alive at all costs. The Ho Chi Minh Trail was a constant thorn in the side of American and South Vietnamese forces. The US military struggled to stop the steady flow of men and materiel moving south. In 1965, the United States launched Operation Rolling Thunder, an extensive aerial bombing campaign intended to cripple the North Vietnamese war effort by targeting the trail. However, the resilience of the North Vietnamese proved stronger than expected. When one section of the trail was destroyed, they repaired it within hours, or simply rerouted the supply convoys through alternate paths. The dense jungle made it incredibly difficult for American pilots to accurately locate and target the trail, even with advanced aerial reconnaissance. The North Vietnamese, meanwhile, used camouflage, decoys, and rapid mobility to stay one step ahead. One of the most daring and ultimately disastrous attempts to cut off the trail came in 1971 with Operation Lam Son 619. In this ambitious campaign, US and South Vietnamese forces launched a massive ground assault aimed at severing the trail at its midpoint in Laos. However, the North Vietnamese were well prepared for the attack. They unleashed fierce resistance, engaging the invaders in weeks of brutal combat. Eventually, the Allied forces were forced to retreat, and the mission was considered a catastrophic failure. Despite relentless bombing, ground incursions, and surveillance, the Ho Chi Minh Trail endured. It became more than just a supply route. It was a symbol of determination, of how a weaker force could use asymmetrical warfare, terrain mastery, and relentless willpower to outlast a militarily superior enemy. Devastating impact of Agent Orange. In the annals of the Vietnam War, few topics are as controversial and emotionally charged as the use of Agent Orange. This toxic herbicide, employed by the United States military as part of its chemical warfare strategy, left a tragic and enduring legacy in its wake. The consequences of Agent Orange are still felt today, with its poisonous effects lingering in the environment and afflicting countless innocent civilians who continue to suffer from its devastating health consequences. The story of Agent Orange begins in the early 1960s when the United States military sought a way to combat the Viet Cong's use of dense jungle foliage as cover for their guerrilla tactics. In response, they turned to a powerful herbicide known as Agent Orange, which was manufactured by companies like Monsanto and Dow Chemical. The herbicide's primary ingredient, dioxin, was a potent toxin known for its ability to kill vegetation quickly and effectively. Beginning in 1961 and continuing until 1971, the United States military conducted a large-scale defoliation campaign known as Operation Ranch Hand. Over the course of the operation, more than 20 million gallons of Agent Orange was sprayed across vast swathes of Vietnam, as well as parts of Laos and Cambodia. The goal was to destroy the dense jungle canopy that provided cover for the Viet Cong and to ruin the crops that sustained them, effectively depriving them of the resources they needed to wage war. The immediate effects of Agent Orange were staggering. Vast areas of lush jungle were transformed into barren wastelands, and once fertile agricultural lands lay in ruins. However, it soon became apparent that the consequences of the herbicide extended far beyond its intended targets. The civilian population of Vietnam began to experience a wide array of health problems, ranging from skin rashes and respiratory issues to birth defects and increased cancer rates. The tragic legacy of Agent Orange was not limited to the Vietnamese people. American servicemen who had been exposed to the herbicide during their tours of duty began to report similar health problems upon returning home. Many of these veterans faced a long and difficult struggle for recognition and compensation for the damage they had suffered at the hands of this toxic chemical. One such veteran, Master Sergeant Elmo R. Zumwalt III, was the son of Admiral Elmo R. Zumwalt Jr., who had ordered the use of Agent Orange during his tenure as commander of the U.S. naval forces in Vietnam. The younger Zumwalt, who had been exposed to Agent Orange while serving in Vietnam, was diagnosed with cancer in 1983 and passed away in 1988. His father, racked with guilt over the role he played in the use of the herbicide, became an outspoken advocate for the victims of Agent Orange and dedicated the remainder of his life to raising awareness about the issue. The struggle for justice for the victims of Agent Orange has been long and arduous. In 1984, a class action lawsuit brought by American veterans against the manufacturers of Agent Orange resulted in a $180 million settlement. However, the Vietnamese victims have not been so fortunate. Despite numerous attempts to seek compensation, their pleas for justice have largely fallen on deaf ears. Today, the toxic legacy of Agent Orange continues to haunt the people and the environment of Vietnam. Dioxin, the deadly chemical found in the herbicide, remains in the soil and water, poisoning the land and affecting new generations of Vietnamese. The United States and Vietnam have only recently begun working together on efforts to clean up the contaminated sites and mitigate the ongoing damage caused by this tragic chapter in history. The Tet Offensive. January 1968. On the first day of the Lunar New Year known as Tet, North Vietnamese forces and the Viet Cong launched a series of surprise attacks against South Vietnamese and American positions across South Vietnam. This massive military campaign, which would become known as the Tet Offensive, shook the very foundations of the war effort and forever changed the way the conflict was perceived by the American public. As fireworks and celebrations marked the arrival of the new year, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong seized the moment to strike, targeting more than 100 cities and towns in South Vietnam. Among the most significant assaults were those on the United States Embassy in Saigon and the ancient city of Hue, where a brutal battle raged for nearly a month before the city was recaptured by American and South Vietnamese forces. The Tet Offensive was orchestrated by General Vo Nguyen Giap, a military strategist who believed that a massive and coordinated assault could demoralize US and South Vietnamese forces, provoke an uprising among the South Vietnamese population, and potentially bring a swift end to the war. Although the offensive did not achieve all of its intended objectives, it succeeded in delivering a psychological blow to the American war effort and increased doubts about the viability of achieving victory in Vietnam. Back in the United States, the Tet Offensive came as a shock to a public that had been led to believe the war was going well and that victory was within reach. The images of the US Embassy under siege and the brutal street fighting in Hue were broadcast into American homes, shattering the illusion of a conflict under control and exposing the harsh reality of a war with no end in sight. As public opinion began to turn against the war, the American political landscape also shifted. President Lyndon B. Johnson, a staunch supporter of the war effort, faced growing opposition within his own party and an expanding anti-war movement, ultimately leading him to announce that he would not seek re-election in 1968. The Tet Offensive also had a profound impact on the presidential campaign of Richard Nixon, who would win the election that year by promising to bring peace with honor to Vietnam. The long-term impact of the Tet Offensive extended beyond the political sphere. It raised fundamental questions about the nature of the war and America's role in it. For many, the offensive was a turning point, a moment when belief in the righteousness of the cause began to waver, and the human cost of the conflict took on greater weight. As journalist Walter Cronkite, often called the most trusted man in America, said after the offensive, "It is increasingly clear to this reporter that the only rational way out then will be to negotiate, not as victors, but as an honorable people who lived up to their pledge to defend democracy and did the best they could." Though the Tet Offensive was not a decisive military victory for the North Vietnamese, it proved to be a critical turning point in the Vietnam War. It exposed the grim reality of the conflict and shook the American public's faith in its leaders and in the cause for which their country was fighting. Psychological warfare in Vietnam. In the shadows of psychological warfare in Vietnam, both sides deployed a formidable arsenal of propaganda, deception, and terror tactics to influence public opinion and demoralize their enemies. This invisible front of the conflict played a crucial role in shaping the course of the war, often with consequences that resonated far beyond the battlefield. As we delve into the murky depths of psychological warfare during the Vietnam War, we uncover a fascinating history of manipulation, intrigue, and the hidden power of the human mind. The use of psychological tactics in the Vietnam War was not confined to one side or faction. The United States and its South Vietnamese allies employed a series of propaganda techniques both domestically and internationally to gain support for their cause and undermine enemy morale. They flooded radio airwaves with broadcasts and dropped leaflets, painting a picture of a just and noble fight against the spread of communism. One notable example of American psychological warfare efforts was Operation Wandering Soul, launched in 1969. The operation involved using loudspeakers to broadcast eerie, pre-recorded sounds of moaning and wailing spirits, aiming to exploit the Vietnamese belief in the wandering souls of the dead. The goal was to demoralize and frighten Viet Cong soldiers, weakening their resolve to fight and encouraging them to defect. Meanwhile, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong conducted their own psychological operations, using terror and propaganda tactics to undermine the South Vietnamese government and its American supporters. They infiltrated South